All right, so I've got a Ryobi router table. That's right there. And I want to talk to you about tolerance and workmanship and quality. And you don't expect anything special out of cheap tools. I certainly don't, but I wanted to modify my table to be a little better for what I wanted to do, and I made some mistakes, and I want to share them with you and invite you along as I fix them. So the idea was they had a track that went in this right here that fit a really sloppy, wide, sliding miter gauge. I routed a slot next to the other one so that I could get my miter gauge closer to the bit when it comes up. The other one I filled in, you can see, nice tight flush. Now these fillers that I made are just so that I have a flat table when I'm not using the miter gauge. And of course these tracks here I put in because I wanted to make a sled, a router sled. And at first I didn't think that I would want to use the router sled in a fashion that would require me to go all the way through. So I did not router those through from left to right. I stopped in the middle. And then I got to thinking, well, maybe I'd like to do that. And so using the same measurement that I had used prior, I clamped my fence, which was a level, back down to the table to finish my cut. And what I'm going to show you is right here, you can see I've got a sloppy mess. And the reason for that is because don't come with a base that is perfect. That's why when you do any kind of routing that requires you're going to put a patch in with an insert like this, they say hold your router in a fixed position. So for instance, if I'm holding these handles, instead of turning the router as I come around each side of a pattern, they say hold it in the same position and move it. Now obviously this base that's on here is just, it fits inside of this router table. But all of that to say, some way or another, I routed either from the other side of the table when I changed my mind, or I measured from the wrong side of my router and ended up with a unacceptable deviation. And I'm going to show you what I mean. This, turn that so that it's touching both sides again. Now when I touch a square in there and I pull my tape, I've got 2 15/16. Other side. Three inches. You can see the router plate on the bottom sticks out, and it doesn't stick out as far on this side as it does on this side. So when you get a set of these bushings, then it usually comes with a centering pin. So in this case, I've got a 1/4 inch set with an 1/8 inch bit that helps center the bit so that your bit doesn't hit the side of your bushing at all. And I'm going to put this back in my router so that I can fix my router. Now what I did is I took this pin doesn't fit in the 3/16, but it does fit in the 13/64. So that will fit in my router, and I'm going to try and fix this plate. Now I've got a flat spot on there which I can't make round, obviously, but I want to be able to know that if I'm going to make a pattern, say I want to mortar something in, that when I make my pattern and I measure from my bit, that every round surface on my router is not going to be different and cause me that same problem that I had yesterday. And so I'm going to try and devise a way to fix my router plate. One of the things that I come up with, and we're going to give it a try, you're going to get to watch, is I'm going to mount my centering pin in the router. I'm going to drill a hole in a piece of wood and clamp it. And what's important to note is that this is a magnesium or aluminum base. It's non-ferrous. That's the point. It's non-ferrous. There's a screw that my magnet catches, but I'm not going to route off at the screw. I'm going to try and route off this plate so that when I run it in a pattern, I always have the same distance from my bit to the edge of my router, so that no matter what I do, I won't end up with that same problem I had yesterday. So I'm going to set it up and then invite you along to watch. We'll see if I destroy my router or not. Now this old bit, it hasn't been used in a long time. It's pretty rusty. I can re-sharpen it, and I'll have a video posted up later about sharpening the router bit. But it's still plenty sharp for what I'm going to do. Now this is a plunge router, and you hear people say all the time, "Oh, don't use a plunge router in a router table." Particular router has an adjustment. It's a turn knob on the bottom, so I can raise and lower my my router. I can raise this up. There's that working on a hill and a wobbly table, trying to do precision work. Now again, that magnesium base, this carbide bit should cut. If I get too close, it should cut that magnesium without causing catastrophic damage. That's the reason I picked the magnesium, or chose this as a method of maybe dealing with my problem. So I'm going to finish setting this up, and then we'll show you my hopeful fix. Okay, so I've added a fence and a couple of pieces of MDF that are the same thickness. One is just a flat base to help me keep my base. I've got a thicker piece of MDF to act as a fence, to act like I'm doing a pocketed type of routing job. So this side, which we're going to call the right side because of the flat, when I'm holding the flat towards me, my right hand will be on that handle. Two and three, and that's 2 and 15/16. So just to highlight the difference and show you the problem. Now, let's see if I can line this up in a way that makes you see what I see. Right here, you can see it's offset by just ever so much. And you can see there's a little bit of a bump on this side where it shifted over and took the deeper pass. And that's what we're trying to eliminate in the future. We want it to all be the same. Important information, what we're doing. The fence was too tall to allow my router to spin around in a circle with the handles, and they don't come off. So I replaced the fence with a low fence, just a straight edge from my shop. I got a shorter piece of scrap that can slide in between two trap fences. So I've got it trapped, I've got it clamped and trapped. That's going to allow me to move my router in and out. My piece that slides has to be bigger than the base of my router, so that my router can sit and turn freely. So it can sit and turn freely. Now, in order for me to route this off properly, because that's what we're going to do, is we're going to use that other router bit and route off. We checked it for ferrous to make sure it wasn't ferrous metal, but we don't want to actually touch the metal if we can help it. It's got a nice paint job, don't want to scuff up the paint. All we want to do is route off that lip, and we don't even want to get rid of the whole lip, we just want to make it round, get rid of the imperfections that are causing our problem. But if we have to hit the metal to make that happen, again, it's non-ferrous, that carbide bit should trim that ever so slightly without causing us damage. But we'll see. I mean, that's why you're here, right? All that to say, I have to drill a hole in my sled. Now I want it to be close enough to the edge that I have full support on my base, but still lets me trim off the excess, and I can move it in and out by sliding it. But I don't, I'm going to, when I get this mounted, I don't want to leave this free sliding, because that adds a variable. So I'll clamp this down at what I think is the shortest point and give it a go. And if there's a place where it doesn't actually trim, then we'll slide it again and keep working our way like a machinist would, you know, working on a piece of metal. But we're carving plastic, so hopefully it's a fairly safe operation. But all that to say, I have to, now that I have that established, I'm going to lower my, so this is just that centering dowel for my inlay kit. So it's perfectly smooth. I had the thought that if I didn't have this, I would just use one of my router bits that has a bearing. So I would pick, and it really wouldn't matter, I just need a drill bit the size of the bearing, and then I could drill I would need a thicker piece of stock, but I would drill a hole in my stock that bearing could fit in and allow me to turn my router. So that's another option if you don't have a centering dowel, but you'd have to have the exact size bit for the bearing. For me, I already sized using a hole sizing gauge, and we're using our 13/64 bit because that's what fits that centering dowel. So we're going to drill our hole and get back to you. All right, so this is that centering bit that I had in my router, and what I apparently didn't record was the first go round of routing off the plastic, which you're going to see The second time I routed later on, but this is the original hole that I drilled and used the first time that I routed this, my router. So you can see here there is some wiggle because 13/64 was just it's the only bit that fit, but obviously tolerance, just like at the factory, tolerance was a problem. So this is the new hole I drilled, and I told you I burnished it down in, or I will tell you that, but it's so much tighter, and you can see it doesn't have any wiggle. So dropped down a size and then made a tighter hole. Now the bit I used to drill the hole was too small, but when I chucked this in the drill bit and just burnished it on down into the hole, and you can see that made it tight enough that I was able to get zero tolerance hole. Between that and not having my setup clamped so that there was pressure from this way going that way, so remember this could slide before, which I still needed it to slide, but once I got it set to the place where I needed it, then I clamped it side to side as well as the end, which took care of more of the slop. And so that's what you missed, because I apparently didn't record through this gap. And on to what was recorded. All right, I rechecked my setup. I had a loose fence on this side. We'll check and see how this does now. All right. Let's see. You can see it still off by just a smidge. Notice there's some little chatter marks from the router, ever so slight, much like when you're doing your other work, I guess, when you're doing inlays, still end up sanding sometimes, most of the time. hole's just a little bit loose. So the only way I'm going to fix my problem is to get a little tighter hole, even though that is the right bit. It's just not tight enough. So what I did this time, I took the 3/16 bit, which is too tight for that centering dowel to go into, but I drilled the hole using the 3/16 bit. Then I burnished it down in. What I mean is I chucked it in a drill and I burned it down through the hole, so there is no side to side in that. Also, this time I've clamped my fence, my two fences, and my sliding piece, so there's no possibility that there's going to be any kind of movement this way. Back on, because again, we're trying to minimize any chance of moving. So I've reset this. This actually hits. Let's see, we're going to plug in our router. Power's off. Let's give it one more go. Well, you can see I definitely got magnesium that time. There's magnesium dust everywhere. So let us gonna run it one more time. Super slow. I think we got a better product. First thing to notice is we still didn't get in to much metal there, but we did polish that up considerably. It's not near the chatter marks we had before, so there we go. All right. Well, you can see it's all about tolerance. We're in line perfectly.